The Obi-Wan Kenobi show is finally done. After finale, I've taken some time to air off, collect my thoughts, and I think now I'm ready to talk about it. I know this is a tight ask, but I'm aiming for this video to resonate with the hopeful optimist that enjoyed Kenobi.
Come on, let's keep a little optimism.
While also engaging neck deep in the show's many criticisms. I'm not here to bag on the show, nor am I here to pander to the Disney overlords, or people that believe the show is perfect, if those people even exist. Hopefully, some of you might find this video a bit sobering from what has been an emotional rollercoaster of a show for fans from start to end. So buckle up, get ready, let's go.
This is where the fun begins.
I think it's fair to say that the show has been rather divisive in the Star Wars fan base. I'm thinking almost the Last Jedi levels of division here, but like an episodic Star Wars entry, this limited series has been well viewed across the world. Let me explain just how well viewed. The Obi-Wan Kenobi premiere averaged 11.18 million viewers on its premiere launch. Take a step back with me quickly to 2005. Back then, movie tickets costed $9.94. Revenge of the Sith grossed $108 million at the box office on the opening weekend. That equates to roughly 10.9 million viewers for Revenge of the Sith on its opening weekend. The math is by no means perfect. There are many things that could have been factored in to give a more accurate comparison. However, it simply serves to give you perspective on just how popular and viewed this Obi-Wan Kenobi show is. It's comparable to Revenge of the Sith. The bottom line is, this show has been broadcast and people have been watching it. So it's perplexing to see that at times the show almost looks fan filmy, like it had a bit of a low budget. A lot of money goes into making shows like this. The original budget for the show's production was speculated to be near $25 million. However, COVID inflated the price dramatically. According to reports from Star Wars Garrison, the show's final budget was approximately 90 million USD. Whilst that sounds like a lot of money, Moon Knight, a show that CGI was a bit choppy at times to begin with, was given a huge $165 million plus budget. I mean, Rise of Skywalker's budget was $275 million. Could you imagine what might have been if this Kenobi episode had just a shred more budget like that? For a bit more fun juxtaposition, let's compare the Rise of Skywalker and Kenobi one last time. We're talking dollars per minute here. The Rise of Skywalker cost, on average, $1.9 million per minute, while Obi-Wan was $378,000 per minute. Those are some expensive minutes. It gives credence to this idea that Obi-Wan feels like it had a tight budget, because comparatively, it really did. I mean, the Book of Boba Fett still cost an extra $10 million more. In order for us to get a full scope of the highs and lows of this show and form an objective view, we need to analyze it, episode by episode. So that's what we're going to do here. And if you'd rather just hear my general thoughts on the video, click here now. Now, I recognize it's harder to create than to criticize, so it must be said that I believe there is gold to be found in this show. So,
Strap yourselves in.
this is a spoiler warning. You've been warned.
This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill.
For me, episode 1 was a doozy. The episode begins with an introduction of Order 66. Many people have stipulated that we need a movie or show just about these events, and I reckon they're right. The opening scene was incredible. We watched a Jedi Knight protect younglings from the clone onslaught. This seemed to set up a lovely precedent that the show will draw frequent inspiration from the prequels. And whilst that is somewhat true, unfortunately the concept is not realized until near the end of the series. We are then introduced to Kenobi, and the repetition of the quiet working life he has been living for a decade. There is a melancholy vibe to this episode. It demonstrates the repetitious nature to his existence, a bland and simple, undisturbed life of hiding. They use Kenobi's working day and transportation with somber music to help sell this mundane life that Obi-Wan has inflicted upon himself for his failure to Anakin and the Jedi. This slice of life was an excellent introduction to get us reorientated with the character. The slow pace of the episode worked really well for me. Kenobi's distance from the Force is displayed by his distance to the Jedi way. He's less inclined to help people, instead he brushes it off. Brief flashbacks are used primarily in dream sequences to give a visual for the trauma Obi-Wan is enveloped in. Next, we are introduced to the Inquisitors of the show. The Grand Inquisitor, the third sister, fifth brother, and the fourth sister. The Inquisitors enter a Tatooine establishment seeking out a Jedi. The Grand Inquisitor gives an expositional but menacing spiel about their role as Jedi hunters. Then Reva attempts to murder the shopkeeper to draw out the Jedi. That, whilst undermining the Grand Inquisitor, is proven an effective method. One competent point to Reva, I guess. The Jedi named Nari flees and finds Obi-Wan. He attempts to rally him to the cause, but he doesn't meet a Jedi master. He meets an old lost man.
The time of the Jedi is over. We lost.
This is an excellent way to further showcase how far Kenobi has fallen. Cut now to Alderaan, and we are to be introduced to the first surprise of the series, the Organa family. I have nothing but good things to say about Leia's casting. Yes, she's a bit on the young side, but I mean, she's a 9-year-old trying to play a 10-year-old. Credit where credit's due. For a child actor, her performance is acceptable in my eyes. Back on Tatooine, we are shown the tumultuous nature of Owen and Kenobi's relationship. Owen is cautious and hostile towards Kenobi's advances to watch over and train Luke.
We talked about this. When the time comes, he must be trained.
Like you trained his father?
Their conversation is ended by the Inquisitors re-entering the town square. They come in arguing. They're in conflict with each other, demonstrating that they're a disunified group. Reva cuts off a hand of an innocent lady for the intimidation factor, before then turning to Owen and claiming he knows something about the Jedi. I guess she sensed it or something? If she sensed that Owen knew something, why didn't she just use her mind reading ability on him? Nonetheless, the tension in this scene is pretty sweet, but it feels like a massive convenience. Reva is about to execute Owen before the fifth brother interjects.
No!
We can also note that Obi-Wan did not come in to save Owen. We cut to the Inquisitors arguing again in the alleyway. Let's take a quick second to shout out Bail Organa. He is endearing and inspiring as always. He's thoughtful and a strong listener. His dialogue with Leia is a delight to be sure. Unfortunately, Leia ain't interested, and she takes some R&R to the woods and is captured by the most incompetent band of child kidnappers I have ever seen.
Parkour! Parkour!
This is ridiculous.
Oh, hello there!
Anyway, Leia's abduction compels Bail to reach out to Kenobi for help.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Side note, I thought the Inquisitors hanging the dead Jedi by the rooftops was dark and demonstrates the ruthless genocidal manhunt the maniacal Inquisitors live for. It would have been cooler if the Jedi had a few holes in him, but what are you gonna do? We immediately learned that Leia's abduction was plotted by none other than our competent evil wizard friend Reva.
Wow. Wait a minute.
How did Reva know about the connection Obi-Wan had with the Organas? If it was common knowledge, why didn't anyone else like, oh, I don't know, Darth Vader exploit this earlier? The shot cuts to Leia not being scared in the slightest by her captors. Whilst I'm sure the intent is to demonstrate the confident, fearless nature of Leia from the original trilogy, this really didn't work for me. I mean, she's just a kid at this point. It would have been far more impactful for us to see how she develops into this fearless Leia throughout the course of the series, than for it to just be intrinsically who she is as a 10-year-old. Anyway, our conflicted Jedi protagonist, inspired by the efforts of Bail Organa and the dead Jedi in the town square, is compelled to leave Tatooine and embark on a rescue mission. For me, the music at the end, the walk, the pace, it was all just perfect, and it left me excited for what was to come. For me, episode 2 was a misstep with memorabilia. Obi-Wan embarks on a mission to Daiyu to rescue Leia. Daiyu is oozing with a hustle and bustle neo-Hong Kong atmosphere. We see a clone trooper from the Clone Wars era begging on the streets. It's a powerful moment. He is older, disheveled, and it seems like the creators of the show took care to keep continuity with the clone's age acceleration. A nice touch. Another fun detail is that Ewan's Kenobi says,
I'm looking for my daughter.
to his actual real-life daughter. The episode also introduces us to a con man pretending to be a Jedi named Haja. Whilst using the facade of a Jedi might seem like a big brain move. Remember, we have these Inquisitor guys that want to kill all of them, thereby making his acting game a little bit risky. Obi-Wan's characterization is on point throughout this episode. He is gruffer and it's great. Obi-Wan off-screen infiltrates a Breaking Bad space lab and causes a distraction to access Leia's cell. However, Obi-Wan is tricked into a cell with a hoax decoy and is 3v1 by the captors. They get into a bit of a tussle, but Obi-Wan ends up gassing them, much to Reva's dismay. I really enjoy these fights. It calls back to older video games where Jedi use less conventional techniques to defend themselves in the galaxy. We then cut to the Inquisitors heckling Reva over her rash actions to lure out Kenobi. Essentially, it's more Inquisitor conflict. Every time they've been on screen, they have been in an argument so far. Reva and the Grand Inquisitor continue having some back and forth with some trash talk sprinkled in on both sides. Honestly, I thought the Grand Inquisitor was low-key just gonna cut her down right there for insolence. The episode then takes a turn and transforms into a B-grade John Wick Parabellum short. Reva sends out a bounty on Obi-Wan, and we get a cool shot of all the surrounding bounty hunters getting the notification through their holo projectors. Reva has raised the stakes yet again to try and draw out Kenobi. Wow. So far, she's been showcased as exceptionally competent, whilst the other Inquisitors have done literally nothing but lecture her and hang out off screen. We cut back to Leia being rescued, but not listening to Obi-Wan. She questions if he's really a Jedi, and then out of distrust begins to run away. I don't know why, but I found this interaction a bit insulting. Why is she doing this? I mean, what other options does she have? She doesn't trust him, fair enough, but run away?
Why are you running?
And while she's running, we get a nice Doctor Strange cameo. Again though, how is this 10-year-old outrunning Kenobi? How is this possible? Reva sees them running in the distance and proceeds to jump off a building. Look, I get that Obi-Wan is getting shot at and that he's a bit older and slower than we've known him to be, but what's stopping these bounty hunters from also just shooting little Leia? If I was a bounty hunter, that would seem like a good idea to get Obi-Wan's attention. Also, another small detail is the fact that when Obi-Wan is firing back, he doesn't hit all his shots, again emphasizing how rusty he is. The tension of this scene, juxtaposed with the pacing, seems strange. Whilst being shot at that, Kenobi and Leia have a small chat. I couldn't help but think in my head, stop talking, you're about to get shot. Thankfully, all the bounty hunters of Daiyu were taking a brief hiatus and had the courtesy to hold their fire so that Kenobi could get to the business of rescuing a falling silly Leia.
No!
Look, I'll admit, Obi-Wan saving Leia was a triumphant moment. However, the pacing of the sequence just didn't work for me. After saving Leia, he seems to instant transmission to her. It would have been nice to see him force jump down or something. Anyway, Haja shows up again, and this time he's come to help, and directs Obi-Wan and Leia to a hangar that will provide safe passage. I have no qualms with Haja. He's a pretty fun, nothing character. We then cut to the Grand Inquisitor, chopping Leia's abductors into bite-sized pieces.
Nice.
Following this, we have the confrontation boasted about across the Twitterverse.
The rematch of the century.
Finally, we meet.
Reva! Haja! The conflict is cut criminally short because Reva immediately figures out that he's not a Jedi and then uses the Force to invade his mind. She finds the one person in the whole city who knows something. He said he was a Jedi. Why doesn't she just kill him? Isn't she meant to be aggressive? Oh well. We then cut to Reva miraculously catching up to our heroes at the hangar bay. Reva discloses that Anakin is alive. Ewan's acting here is on point. The shock on his face sells this scene.
Wait a minute.
How does she know this? Isn't that information like top secret? Doesn't Vader usually kill people that know that stuff? Reva seems to know just about everything so far. Good thing the Grand Inquisitor is here. Put an end to her charade.
Why are you the way that you are?
This scene for me was very immersion breaking. If he's dead, it breaks canon. If he's alive, well then hey, I guess getting stabbed in the stomach ain't no thing. And before you hit me up with how his species has 2 stomachs, I already know. I still think that it makes lightsabers seem weaker as a result and reduces the danger levels in the show. Personally, it generally just annoyed me. The episode ends on a high though. We get a great shot of Obi-Wan and Vader. It's hands down the best shot of the series so far. Kenobi reaches out to Anakin and we are met with a close-up of Vader in his Bacta tank with Imperial sinister music. It's a great way to end the episode. Well, with that rescue mission out of the way, let's move on to see where the series goes from here. My initial impressions of episode 3 was that it was pretty great. They intentionally take time to develop the relationship between Obi-Wan and Leia, and for what it's worth, I think they did a great job. However, the setting of the episode felt a bit cheap. It felt a bit too much like a fan film on the occasion. The episode opens with Obi-Wan reaching out to Qui-Gon,
Master.
to no avail. Paralleling this, we get a truly haunting and epic suit-up scene of Vader. The prequel lines that coincide with the scene are incredible and heighten the tension. Also, Vader's castle is on point. We cut to Leia and Obi-Wan on their ship, and Leia asks a very plausible question.
The Force, what does it feel like?
Obi-Wan treats us to an exceptional Force analogy. He says that the Force is like the comfort we get from turning on a light in the darkness. It's excellent writing. Next up, we see the Empire's occupation of Mapuzo, a desolate mining planet. I love this stuff, man. This is what a TV show can excel at, showcasing another slice of life in the galaxy far, far away. The Empire cannot simply rule by tyranny. They need sympathizers, allies to establish their cause. This episode was a wonderful demonstration of the normalization and acceptance of the Empire's occupation. Whilst traveling the planet, Obi-Wan sees Anakin in the distance. It's a projection of how he remembers Anakin. This is chilling and an excellent way for us as the audience to peer into Kenobi's mind. The show turns back to Reva as she takes a long walk through Fortress Inquisitoris. Reva intuitively knows where to look for Kenobi.
He's in one of the mining systems.
You do not know that.
I traced the manifest.
Reva's confidence strikes again and irritates the 5th brother. Again, the Inquisitors are arguing. Back on Mapuzo, our protagonist is introduced to a creature called Freck, an Imperial sympathizer who views the Emperor not as a tyranny, but an instigator of order.
Nothing wrong with a little order.
Akin to like an intergalactic government. Whilst hitching a ride to a local port, the stormtroopers board the truck as well. The interactions between the stormtroopers and Kenobi are tense. Not to mention it seems like a perfect, plausible scenario. And yet, amidst this tension, the scene also manages to deepen the chemistry between Obi-Wan and Leia, with Kenobi hinting about how he sees Padme in her. Everything in this scene builds on top of the other, making it thematically brilliant. Freck then pulls up at the Imperial inspection gate and he says, "It's a typical inspection. Don't worry, I know these fellas." This works so much for me. Humanizing the stormtroopers is so interesting, and we don't see it enough in Star Wars. Obi-Wan is identified and forced to defend himself. Wow, that was epic. He is briefly captured. Lucky for him, he is rescued by an ex-officer of the Empire called Tala, and they begin to flee. Back at the Fortress Inquisitorius, the fourth sister finally has a line of dialogue in this show.
Gather your battalions now and shut down every single port.
Anyway, the Inquisitors and Vader have narrowed in on Kenobi's position, and they begin their advance. Linking back up with Kenobi, Tala introduces him to the Path, a collection of secret tunnels to link the systems. A brilliant idea. Exceptional, in fact. It's a trafficking route to bring people to safety from Imperial oppression. What an exceptional secret. Oh well, Reva found it. Seriously, how did Reva find it? What are the other Inquisitors doing again? Anyway, the show instantly becomes more serious. We are finally treated to Vader, and boy, was it an entrance. Obi-Wan flees, but Vader pursues, cutting him off at a mining facility. Obi-Wan attempts to continue his retreat, but Vader is relentless, and they engage in combat. Here in this fight, it is clear that Vader is far superior in every way. Obi-Wan literally doesn't stand a chance.
What have you become?
I am what you made me.
That was bloody brilliant.
The physicality of their fighting represents their power disparities well. Vader is using only one-handed techniques, while Obi-Wan is struggling to repel Vader's onslaught with two hands, making for some tense action. I also love the fact that this fight isn't clean. Obi-Wan is losing, barely surviving, and I think in this moment, the shaky cam actually works to elevate the drama. Vader completely overpowers Kenobi and unveils his vengeful nature. He ignites flammable mining material and then proceeds to drag Obi-Wan face first through it. This immediately draws parallels to Revenge of the Sith and the pain Anakin suffered at his loss to Kenobi. This was powerful for me. Vader is pure evil, but his actions is still grounded on his past. He wants Obi-Wan to suffer like he did. Vader doesn't want to just kill Kenobi. This makes sense. It's not just a James Bond plot convenience where the evil guy draws everything out so that they'll eventually lose. I mean, this situation is a trope, but I think its execution here is good. It's plausible. I'll tell you what isn't plausible. Tala trying to rescue Obi-Wan and living from this encounter. This probably would have been a good way for her to die, and would have demonstrated the hopelessness the galaxy would have been feeling from the force of the Empire. Nonetheless, we cut to Vader, staring out over the fire, looking onto the droid collecting Obi-Wan's seared body. It was interesting. We are left wondering what is going on in his mind under that helmet. In the comics, Vader can literally walk in lava, but instead, he stands there and watches. Some people don't like this. I get that, but for me, it works to highlight the conflict within Vader. Vader seemed to have pity for his former master. My thoughts are that he is seeing himself in Obi-Wan's position. He's seeing Palpatine rescuing him from Mustafar and is taken aback. We then cut to Leia using the path and running to her extraction point. To her dismay, she reaches the site only to be confronted by Reva.
Invincible. Wait a minute.
We've established that Leia is a track athlete who can outrun grown adults, right? So how does Reva, 1, know where the path leads to? And 2, how does she beat Leia to the end? When we've seen that Leia's been running this path a lot longer than Reva.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
The pacing of this section feels cheap and, to be honest, left a sour taste in my mouth. The episode wraps up with the stakes higher than ever. We are left asking ourselves, how is Obi-Wan going to leave the planet, especially with a big Imperial starship in the orbit and the Inquisitors and Vader pursuing them? Oh. Never mind, it's all good. They get away with no trouble at all. You know, I was genuinely anticipating a time skip somewhere in this show, and I felt like it might be coming after this episode. Episode 4. Now for me, this episode is the worst of them all, by a considerable margin. Ben Kenobi is severely injured and in a daze. He is placed into a bacta tank to heal on Jabim. Here we have some seriously interesting parallels between Vader and Obi-Wan.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Every time this show is contrasting between Vader and Obi-Wan, it has been enthralling to watch. Anyway, Obi-Wan seems to hop out of the bacta tank as soon as he hopped into it, and then we are introduced to a new character, Rokan. Rokan seems to be the sheriff of this rebel-esque establishment. His purpose is to show that the Rebel Alliance is in its infancy and will come to be. Oh, and he is an expositional mouthpiece. But better than that, he's seemingly bipolar. He initially refuses to help.
General, I'm sorry, but that's not my problem.
Shut it down, everything runs out of here.
I had a wife once. I knew exactly what she was before we got married. We tried to hide it. And the Inquisitors found her anyway.
A few moments later.
You want my help? You got it.
Well, that was jarring. I could have thought that line came from fanfiction, not a multi-million-dollar production with paid professional writers. Anyway, Rokan gives us an expositional dump about Vader's planet system and the Inquisitor's fortress.
Wait a minute.
How do they know all of this? Hold on, how do they know about the layout and design of the Inquisitor's fortress? Well, they don't tell us. They just sweep that one under the rug, I guess. So, now we embark on Rescue Leia the sequel. To begin this adventure, Tala tells Obi-Wan,
"Your body's not the only thing that needs to heal, Ben. The past is a hard thing to forget, and you just need time, that's all."
Whilst this is true and interesting, I wish Obi-Wan could have these revelations himself, rather than people pointing things out to him all the time. Show us that our protagonist is mildly competent, is self-aware. There are two plots unfolding in this episode, the Reva show and the Obi-Wan show. Reva is interrogating a 10-year-old girl, whom is not in any way, shape or form, scared of her. As previously established, Leia is way too competent as a child. It breaks suspension of disbelief. Children are still children, even if they're force sensitive. Reva attempts to pressure Leia to give information, but she fails. She even tries to extract the information from little Leia's mind using the Force, and it still doesn't work. How is this possible? Do the writers not understand that whilst they're trying so hard for us to bear with Reva as a villain, having her fail to interrogate and forcefully extract information doesn't make Leia look more powerful, it makes Reva look extremely weak. So, what are you gonna do when a little 10-year-old girl bests you? Well, you throw her into a torture chair, of course. Reva is about to straight up electroshock therapy this kid.
Oh, right!
Alongside these scenes, we get Kenobi and Tala's infiltration of Fortress Inquisitoris. Tala enters the fortress under her Imperial officer guise. There is some considerably tense dialogue in these scenes. She talks her way out of confrontation with another Imperial officer in charge of security. She plays the role of Imperial officer to a T.
Most impressive.
She then reaches the control center and opens a hatch for Obi-Wan to enter the fortress. However, while in this control center, Tala enjoys having a mad chat with Obi-Wan, and no one seems to bat an eyelid. It's peculiar. It feels unbelievable. I feel like maybe we should have seen a bit more of a layout of the plan. Maybe take creative inspiration from heist movies, you know? Really lean into those tropes. This could have been an intriguing heist episode. Cutting back to Tala, she is eventually investigated by another officer and just taken aside. She then beats him up and walks straight back to the console to continue her yarn with Kenobi. Tala's initial entry into the facility and allowing Kenobi into the fortress, I can get behind. But at some point throughout all of this, the audience is left asking, how incompetent are the Empire? Isn't this like a big old secret base or something? Anyway, Talia distracts the third sister by delivering her information about the path and the location of the Jedi.
They're on Florum. The network runs out of the Sertar sector.
However, Tala forgot something very important. You see, Reva knows everything.
Unless, of course, you're lying.
Reva sees through the light immediately, like right away, to an unbearable extent. At just this very moment, the alarm begins to ring in the fortress, basically proving that Talia is lying. Well, I guess Talia is dead now, right? Nope, it's interrogation time, baby. Reva turns and leaves the stormtroopers with Tala. Then, something truly unthinkable happens. Did she just slap that stormtrooper? He's acting like he's concussed. What, you got a cerebral hemorrhage from a slap? Just shoot her, man! We then cut back to Obi-Wan, who has stumbled across the Inquisitor's tomb. It holds a collection of all the Jedi they have murdered. There seems like a genuinely interesting story to be told here, and I low-key wish that it was in the show. Anyway, Obi-Wan rescues Leia, Force Unleashed style. He slashes the stormtroopers in the dark and hides himself by deactivating his saber. This is almost cool. It's just that, wait, did his lightsaber just bounce off that guy? Come on, guys. This was a great idea for live action, and you stifled it out by just going for that PG rating? I mean, we saw a stormtrooper get cut in half. Why don't you just put 4 or 5 more stormtroopers in this room and give Kenobi a chance to use the dark to his advantage? Regardless, Obi-Wan and Leia's respite doesn't last long, and they're caught while fleeing. At this moment, Obi-Wan gets his mojo back. He starts deflecting blaster fire and using the Force again with minimal difficulty. There's a weird moment where Obi-Wan is using the Force to hold back the glass, and somehow he's not shot. Obi-Wan floods the corridor and they escape and are immediately met by Tala. I guess we just need to buy the idea that somehow, while the place is in high alert, Tala was able to locate them. Anyway, she gives Obi-Wan a coat in which Leia hides underneath, and they walk past all Imperial security and make it to the hangar. This scene serves to tell and reiterate to the audience not how clever our heroes are, but how outlandishly stupid the Imperial security is. I really wish they would have written this differently and we saw a more competent Empire. Nonetheless, they make it to the hangar and then Reva finds them. Because of course she does. Reva confronts our trio and things look like the end for the gang. Thankfully, out of nowhere, a few speeders come into the fray. Way too fast, may I add. They look like they're heading straight into the hangar wall. Our heroes are collected by the speeders and they escape. Meanwhile, Reva deflects large laser fire from a vehicle.
Wait a minute.
Is this even possible? Those blaster bolts are massive. Is this possible? I'd love for someone to let me know in the comments below. To me, this scene felt unrealistic at best, and at worst, like they didn't even understand Star Wars. The speeders make a run for it, and Reva, in a last-ditch effort, throws an explosive and kills my boy Wade. I'm sorry to nitpick here, but indulge me for one sec. Firstly, I feel like if you're flying away from an enemy base, you would be checking your rear vision mirror, right? Surely they have those. And secondly, they're escaping on speeders. The Empire have TIE fighters in their fortress. Surely they pursue them, right? Nope. Well, I guess they can just fly out willy-nilly from Vader's system. No worries, guys.
Forget about it!
Thankfully, the episode redeems itself by treating us to a very angry Vader. He walks into the room and straight up begins choking Reva. And let's be honest, we were all rooting for him to kill her here. The energy from Vader in this scene is fantastic. It is until he lets her go. He lets her live. Realistically, he probably should have just killed her, regardless of her accomplishments. Instead, he lets her say her piece and allows her to keep breathing due to her putting a tracker on Obi-Wan's ship. The episode ends with a shot of Leia's droid, Lola, being all evil. Not only is the content in this episode underwhelming, the episode length is criminally short. It comes in at 32 minutes and 42 seconds. This whole infiltration and escape seems so tacked on and not thought through. It completely broke my immersion. Here's hoping it gets better from here. Episode 5, the episode we wanted. We open to a prequel flashback of Obi-Wan sparring with his Padawan Anakin Skywalker. The scene is set in between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. I'll be the first to admit that the de-aging of Anakin looks off, but for me, it's excusable for nothing less than Hayden Christensen's acting. Not to mention the choreography in this scene is outstanding. This very scene aligned perfectly with the expectations I had for the show, and it reminds me of what the show could have been leading up to this point. We should have seen far more scenes like this scattered throughout the entirety of the series.
Mercy doesn't defeat an enemy, Master.
The next scene cuts to the third sister, who is given the title of Grand Inquisitor. We see that the Empire is hot on Kenobi's tail and are heading straight for the planet Jabim. Vader informs Reva to
lock down the facility.
But I kid you not, locking down the facility looks like rogue Lola droid cutting a few wires to seal a hangar door. Oh gosh. The Empire's grand plan is in the hands of Leia's corrupt pet droid. Okay, but back to the good stuff. Vader's invasion of Jabim is contrasted with the flashbacks of Anakin and Obi-Wan sparring. I found this a deeply meaningful way to tell a story, and I think it serves the plot and pacing of this episode extremely well. It finally shows that Obi-Wan is using his intelligence, preempting Vader's moves, as demonstrated through the fact that he knows Anakin better than anyone else. The audience is then transported back to Reva as she begins the assault on Jabim. Troopers open fire on a large blaster-proof door. Blaster fire seems to be doing very little to penetrate its hold. Obi-Wan draws close to the door on the other side and seems to call out to Reva through the Force. Here it is, folks, the grand reveal, the great twist that nobody saw coming. Reva is a misunderstood good guy. Flashbacks inform us that she survived the assault on the Jedi Temple somehow. Obi-Wan asks some probing questions to understand her intentions. We see shaky camera footage of Order 66 with brief glimpses of Anakin's hooded face. This scene sincerely conveys that Reva is dealing with a lot of trauma, and I like that. I think it's a fascinating concept, but I'm not sure if it belongs at an Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Reva discloses that she played dead and hid with the bodies.
Wait a minute.
How did Vader not sense her? In Revenge of the Sith, we see clones shooting bodies after they fall over. They were very thorough. Anyway, Reva becomes a bit cranky from Obi-Wan's questioning, and we learned that all this blaster fire to the door seemed to have been superfluous because a lightsaber can cut straight through it. Reva cuts through the lock mechanism with ease.
It's over 9,000!
Obi-Wan immediately orders people to fall back and the firefight ensues. Now look, we've seen some epic firefights in Star Wars canon. This unfortunately was not one of them. No one is using cover effectively. They're all just standing out in the open, shooting one another for minutes at a time. Realistically, this would have been over in a matter of seconds, with bodies just dropped to the floor. It's tonally trying to show us some grit, but the pacing, choreography, and execution of the scene do not live up to what I think Deborah Chow was intending to convey. After many minutes of pew-pewing, Tala is shot and then blows herself up for the cause. It's tropey but I liked it. It's a classic Star Wars moment. People sacrificing themselves for something greater, for a bigger cause. You've seen it done better in Rogue One, but Tala's death isn't a bad scene. Oh, now, come to think of it, Tala is the only named character that dies in this entire show. For such high stakes almost all the time, everybody lives. The people retreat into the hangar and seal the blast door to set up for their final defense. Much to my dismay, the onus is not on the adults to escape their perilous situation, but on a 10-year-old Leia to fix the sealed hangar door. When you're trying to create meaningful stakes like the Empire's wrath and Vader's inevitable descent into the planet, maybe don't have it all hinge on a 10-year-old. Seriously, it would have been way more impactful if she had been a scared little kid right now, or maybe she just showed a glimmer of courage. But the plot shouldn't hinge on her competency. That is just lazy, silly storytelling. In sheer desperation, Obi-Wan surrenders himself over to the third sister, and he attempts to convince her to work together. She initially refuses, until Obi-Wan says,
"You're not bringing him to me. I'm bringing him to you."
This is an excellent line that is delivered perfectly by Ewan McGregor. Following this, the third sister orders the stormtroopers to just let Kenobi go, which got me thinking, why did they just obey this without a second thought? I mean, they literally just escorted Kenobi back into the hangar for no apparent reason. What were they, brainwashed or something?
Good soldiers follow orders.
Nonetheless, just when it feels like the show is starting to lose steam, it thankfully picks back up again. We revisit the prequel flashbacks, displaying Anakin's tactics for victory, and then Vader's assault on the base begins. Vader wastes no time and grabs the ship mid-flight, bringing it to the ground and proceeding to rip it apart violently. This is pretty sweet. However, Obi-Wan anticipates this move, and it turns out that him and the gang were in a second ship, hiding in the hangar all along.
See you, chump.
They attempt to jettison out into space, but Vader proceeds to grab the ship and destroy them.
Hello there.
No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't do that. Vader lets them go, which seems a bit odd. Not to mention, isn't there a Star Destroyer in the atmosphere? Wouldn't that Star Destroyer immediately shoot them out of the sky? I'm sorry if this seems again like I'm nitpicking. I just feel like the creative team genuinely forgot they had written the story so that there was a Star Destroyer in the atmosphere. Anyway, Reva then takes a good old swing at Vader, and we are treated to one of the best live-action Vader fights I've ever seen. He doesn't even pick up his saber. He just force pushes her around the place. This fight does a great job at displaying the might of Vader and the insignificance of Reva. In fact, I would go as far to say that aside from Reva breakdancing, this fight was perfect. Not to mention the music in this fight, which helps elevate the sequence. After Reva's humiliating defeat, they juxtapose footage of Order 66, switching between Anakin and Vader as he approaches her, stabs her through, and kills her. Why is she alive? Yes, we knew you were going to be alive, but why is she alive?
Revenge does wonders for the will to live, don't you think?
Great, now take your revenge. Why are they just leaving her here? Why haven't they killed her? I simply do not understand how her plot armor can be this formidable. The episode ends with Reva finding Obi-Wan's broken communicator, which, first off, the Empire is meant to draw parallels to the Nazi occupation, right? If you're a politician in an occupied system, you would think you'd be very discreet, very subtle, very cryptic about the information you divulge over anything. If you think Kenobi is captured or dead, why expound top secret information? I don't know why Bail was not more competent in this scene. Nevertheless, the communication is quite broken. Now, I gotta say, Reva piecing this all together, making inferences from those broken lines of dialogue is quite remarkable. We are supposed to believe that she immediately knows that this is about Darth Vader's secret lost children. She wouldn't have known anything about Padme. Why is it she assumes this? This literally could have meant anything, and more than likely, it could have been interpreted as Bail Organa's son, or heck, maybe even Kenobi's. Again, Reva is far too competent. Finally, Reva living throughout her encounter with Vader reduces the fear we're supposed to have when Vader is on screen. Instead of elevating Reva, it just makes Vader look incompetent, and no one wants to see that, especially after he just wiped the floor with her. And finally, we reach the finale, episode 6. Reva's alive.
Somehow Reva returned.
Whatever, man. Let's just get on with it. The episode opens with Vader's Star Destroyer pursuing Kenobi.
Oh no, not again.
Kenobi gives an inspiring speech about how he needs to leave the ship to ensure everyone's safety and get the Empire off their tail. Leia says,
"No."
Okay. And storms off. There are many scenes in this ship. There are multiple lines of dialogue which otherwise might have been okay, but a Star Destroyer is currently shooting them in space. They've established the stakes are high, but the pacing doesn't seem to match it. I mean, what kind of shield does this ship have? My gosh. A realistic version of this chase.
Increase firepower.
At once, Lord Vader.
It isn't until 11 minutes into this 44-minute episode that Obi-Wan finally leaves that ship. We cut back down to Tatooine with Owen and Beru. They're discussing how they will repel an impending Reva. Beru remarks,
"She'll come when the suns go down."
How does Beru know this? How does she know Reva will come in when the sun is down? What kind of assumption is that? Reva has the Force and a lightsaber. She doesn't need the cover of darkness to come in and wreck you. Moving back to the Star Destroyer, we see some back and forth between the Grand Inquisitor and Vader. I don't mind this scene. I think it's interesting. The decision to abandon the Imperial conspirators and pursue Obi-Wan deserves some thought, although it is a bit odd that the Grand Inquisitor, whose whole role is to hunt and kill Jedi, seems less inclined to hunt Obi-Wan. I digress. Oh look, a convenient planet nearby.
Wow, what do you know?
The next scene shows Obi-Wan standing in the open with Vader approaching. Right off the bat, everything from the dialogue to the lightsaber fight was incredible. It gives credence to Kenobi's episode 3 fight. It adds to the canon. In my opinion, it's one of the best fights in Star Wars history, only overshadowed by Revenge of the Sith. Obi-Wan and Vader's confrontation is littered with member berries. That got my nostalgia like.
Feel the power.
Oh. I could feel it.
Constructively, I think it would have been more satisfying to see more flashbacks for Obi-Wan and how he's interpreting how Anakin would fight. We could have seen Obi-Wan using his intelligence to best Vader, as Vader is blinded by the dark side. Nonetheless, their glorious battle begins. Cross-cutting, we see a fight ensue with Beru and Owen as well against Reva and Tatooine. This is an interesting concept. We see that Owen had all the time in the world to line up a shot, but he misses. Honestly, I would have thought they would have set up some more traps or something. I mean, they had all day to set up. They could have Kevin McAllistered on this chick. Reva bests them both.
Beru! She's coming!
Take that! Go!
But for whatever reason, doesn't just straight up kill them. In fact, it feels like they only live because they're in A New Hope, which makes me think, don't write situations if you don't have meaningful ways to have characters interact and survive them. Crossing back now to
the rematch of the century.
Vader acquires the high ground and obliterates Kenobi. He buries him in a heap of debris and large boulders. Vader then exclaims,
"Did you truly think that you could defeat me? You have failed, Master."
I guess Obi-Wan hid himself in the Force, so Vader thought he would be dead when he wasn't. Obi-Wan, underneath the rubble, is reminded of the hope he fights for, the hope inherent in Luke and Leia. This invigorates Kenobi to continue fighting as he blows away the rubble and charges at Vader. Obi-Wan is relentless, utilizing a sleek combination of flourishes and Force abilities to best Vader. A powerful moment for me is when you get a sense that Vader knows he's losing. He is sliced in the back and consequently lets out a harrowing groan. His groan both conveys the agony of the saber strike and the painful realization that he is in fact failing yet again to defeat his former master. Look, I get it. Obi-Wan besting Vader kinda doesn't make sense in this moment, but in the moment I was happy to excuse it. After Obi-Wan bests Vader and cuts open his helmet, we are blessed with some of the best and most emotional dialogue and performances in all of Star Wars canon.
You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
If you look closely, you can see underneath the mask a sadistic smile from Vader, as if he's reveling in his former master's pain. This scene is peak Star Wars. It is 10 out of 10 material. It's rich with emotion. It's heartbreaking. It is on par with the best that Star Wars has to offer. This scene cannot be understated. Vader's eyes initially resemble the blue highlights of Anakin before transitioning to the trademark yellow Sith eyes. The lighting emitted from the lightsabers illuminates the scene from blue to red, highlighting the conflict and pain within Anakin. Fascinatingly, in canon, we now have Ahsoka who cut the left and Obi-Wan who cut the right side of Vader's helmet. However, neither of the two could draw Anakin back to the light. Only Luke could take the whole helmet off and redeem his father.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme,
The scene doesn't overstay its welcome either. Every line is meaningful and impactful. Obi-Wan, seeing Vader broken and defeated, chooses to spare him. This seems contradictory to a quote from earlier in the episode where Kenobi says,
"Whether he dies or I do, this ends today."
Perhaps Obi-Wan learning of Anakin's death to Vader is enough to give him closure, but I mean, he is still leaving a Sith alive to enact tyranny across the galaxy. Anyway, Obi-Wan jumps in his ship and flies off planet to rescue Luke. And it seems that yet again, the writers forgot that they left a big old Star Destroyer out there in orbit. I mean, come on guys, how did you forget this? What is happening? You wrote yourself into this situation. You can't just omit key details and say, well done everyone, we sure wrote ourselves out of that narrative plot hole. Crossing back to Reva, she catches Luke. However, she doesn't kill Luke because he has 1. Plot armor, and 2. She sees herself as a youngling in Luke's place and chooses to not enact violence like Vader did. This is an interesting idea. It reminds me that somewhere outside of this show, there could have been a compelling Reva story, but as it stands, I wish she would have died in episode 5. That would have been more meaningful in my eyes. Reva returns Luke to Owen and Beru, and she still doesn't seem to die. I don't understand how she's still alive. She had a redeeming moment. I thought the dark side was the only thing keeping her alive or something. I guess it's just another inference. Instead of Reva being redeemed, it could have been cool to have someone like Ahsoka show up and just annihilate her on the spot or something. The episode then begins to wrap up the series. Obi-Wan travels on a dangerous mission back to Alderaan to say goodbye to Leia and the Organas and tie up that plot hole. We then cut back to Tatooine.
You want to meet him?
Where Obi-Wan makes peace with Owen and meets a young Luke.
Hello there.
This right here is my favorite thing.
The show concludes with Obi-Wan hopping on his EOP, a Qui-Gon cameo, and Kenobi riding off into the sunset between Beggar's Canyon. All in all, episode 6 was pretty good. Its highs were high and its lows were rather low. Now that we've analyzed all the episodes, let's move to general thoughts. I think each episode adds to the canon in an interesting and meaningful way. However, the connective tissue between each meaningful addition seldom did enough to justify their existence in the canon. Besides the last 2 episodes, the show lacks impact. Aside from generic rebels and stormtroopers, no one in this show dies by a lightsaber. Literally no one. This reduces the danger and lethality of the weapon, and I think cheapens the overall experience. It's commonplace in filmmaking and television to have multiple plots unfold side by side. It's rewarding when these plots converge in a competent manner. The juggling act between plot and subplot is a delicate thing. Other shows like Stranger Things did it with exceptional precision. Obi-Wan, not so much. When dealing with legacy characters who are well established, you need to tread carefully to both add to their character whilst not undermining what came before. You need to show strong continuity with what the audience's established ideas of the character are. Personally, I think this show needed a few more months in the writing room and could have greatly benefited from more influence from people like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. As I've touched on in the episode's analysis, the audience is frequently having to make inferences for why characters are making decisions. We need to infer their motivations because they aren't always clear. Sometimes this is done to convey mystery or intrigue, but other times it left me thinking, why did that thing just happen? To make matters more perplexing, the show has no problem beating certain messages over your head like you're a preschooler. It's frustrating. It feels like the confusing writing of the show wants us to infer that the writers know what they're doing, as if they're hidden deeper meanings to be found in all this ambiguity. The problem is, I don't think they presented this in a meaningful enough way to tell a complete narrative. Instead, it feels contrived. It would have been great to have explored why Vader let Obi-Wan live on Mapuzo in more detail. Don't get me wrong, I like subtlety, but a glimpse more could have helped. Show us Vader's conflict through Hayden's acting. Show us the pull he has to the light. Show us why he built his fortress on top of a Sith temple on Mustafar. I mean, look here at this video. Even Star Wars Theory made a whole video explaining why the lightsaber bounced off the stormtrooper. We're constantly having to justify these inferences. However, if anything exceptional has come from the show, it's the fact that Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen are getting the applause and appreciation they deserve. Every scene they share together was phenomenal, and it's great to see the community celebrating that. For the next part of the video, we're going to set up camp and look at some key points of interest the Kenobi Show garnered. For those that are blissfully unaware, at the end of 2019, Respawn Entertainment packaged and delivered one of the best Star Wars video games to ever exist, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. A game set in the reign of the Empire, the same era of canon as the show, but approximately 5 years prior to the events of Kenobi. You can tell that Deborah Chow and the team took a lot of cues from the video game. This is evident from the presence of Fortress Inquisitoris and the character arc of Reva. The problem is that the writing in this show doesn't hold up compared to the video game counterpart.
No!
Fallen Order is in every way a better depiction of the irredeemable evil of an Inquisitor that still finds hope. Let me explain. Fallen Order's approach to me is so much more meaningful because the second sister Trilla only just begins to find peace. She has literal seconds of hope before she is cut down by Vader without a second thought. In one dramatic moment, she is gone.
You
You have failed me, Inquisitor.
Avengers!
It makes Vader's personification of evil so much greater. In this show, they get Reva to capture Kenobi, fail, try again, fail again, and then survive her encounter with Darth Vader, only then to try and redeem her by having our protagonist be a mouthpiece for the writer's intent. Kenobi affirms Reva.
You haven't failed them by showing mercy. You have given them peace.
Moments after Reva attempted to assassinate Luke Skywalker. For me, it felt manipulative because it didn't feel like I was watching a story in that moment. Instead, I was envisioning the writer's room and I saw the writer's intent. Rather than being captivated by the story, my point is that Reva, who has excessively more screen time than the second sister, felt rushed. Trilla's redemption felt earned. Speaking of Reva, let's tackle that controversial topic now. I am convinced that underneath the muck, a genuinely compelling Reva story could be told here. She's a youngling that survived through Order 66. That's no small feat. We are shown that Reva is stabbed through by Anakin, or if I'm interpreting that wrong, she's at least clearly playing dead on the temple floor. Then we are told that she got away, only to come back to Vader to prove herself worthy as an Inquisitor. On paper, that sounds really sweet, but from the get-go, her attitude and other characters' attitudes towards her are overwhelmingly negative. They seem to have written her as an intentionally dislikable character. Many fans and commentators have recognized this fact that the show has intent to make us dislike her. But whilst they did this, it also feels like the writers wanted Reva to be the star of the Kenobi show. So much of the plot hinges on her character delivering valuable knowledge or secrets to our legacy character. Seriously, she identifies Owen, knows Bail and Kenobi's connection, flushes Kenobi out of hiding, knows Vader's secret identity, kidnaps Leia twice, finds the secret rebels path, and puts a tracker on Lola. Reva as a character ends up creating far more questions than the writing team care to answer too. Not to mention these are questions we didn't even want to ask as fans. Exhibit A, if Vader knew about Reva knowing his identity,
did you really believe I did not see it, youngling?
How is there still air remaining in her alveoli? How are her vertebrae still joined together? It feels like the show had to constantly justify Reva's importance, and they attempted to do that by having her discover all the MacGuffins and important plot details. In episode 5, Reva is stabbed through by Darth Vader. Let's get one thing straight. If Vader stabs you through the chest, you need to die. Period. Therefore, if the writers wanted to keep her alive that badly, they shouldn't have had her be attacked in that fashion, because it only serves to discredit Vader's ability and alienates the audience. In the finale, they try to redeem Reva with her sparing Luke. This final redemption rings hollow for me. Now when it comes to Reva, let's get one thing straight about the fandom. Not all who criticize are man-children with high horses, and not all who enjoy Reva's character, or the show for that matter, are shills with no perception of quality. And lastly, regarding the racist comments pertaining to Reva aimed at the actress Moses Ingram, hate speech and racist remarks are wrong. Criticism is not. This show has an Inquisitor problem, and the problem is this. Aside from Reva, the Inquisitors are basically incompetent set pieces. The fifth brother's lines are below serviceable. Almost every word that comes out of his mouth is about how he's annoyed at Reva. His whole character is about antagonizing her. This makes him one-dimensional, and since his character orbits around her, it adds cadence to the idea that this show is the Reva show. However, I will say this, that the characterization of the fifth brother Sung Kang brings is fantastic. Everything from his character design, his walk, and voice oozes with authenticity. You can tell that Sung Kang is really trying here. The fourth sister lives in the shadows to a much greater degree though. She only has 6 lines of dialogue in the entire show. The Grand Inquisitor character design is also well detached from its Rebels counterpart. That honestly wouldn't have bothered me as much if they had treated his character with respect, but they don't. They just pretend to kill him off. It would have been incredible to see these Inquisitors converge on a Jedi or our hero Kenobi and be a force to be reckoned with. As it stands, they are a disorganized, grumbling band of incompetent Jedi mercenaries that I honestly can't believe Vader keeps around. I've spoken about Leia in detail throughout the episode breakdowns, so let me just say this. No 10-year-old should overshadow the competence of a grown adult protagonist. Whenever Leia is around, she is written as the expert and the adults are the idiots.
Do as she asks. You trust me? I trust her.
It is just ridiculous. This show has some beautiful shots and set pieces. The problem is that all too often, the video image is unbearably dark. The show constantly uses dark lighting and shaky cam work to convey tone. The problem is that it genuinely impedes on the viewer's enjoyment of the show. Don't get me wrong, cameras have come a long way, and it's great that we can see crisp images on our TV with such low lighting, but the dark lighting is clearly overused here. There were some times I had no idea what was going on in the background because I simply couldn't see the image. Fun fact, dark lighting is often used to cover up patchy CGI work, and judging by the show's budget, I'd say this is very likely. I genuinely enjoyed the illumination of lightsabers in the dark environments. However, upon rewatching, even the LED lighting from the sabers seems a bit overdone due to how dark some scenes are. Now, it wouldn't be a critique without a little rewriting, right? So I'll keep this short. I genuinely think there could have been a better story here. But the first thing we would need to tell a better story is more time. This show seemed to move at the speed of a Shinkansen train. And at other times, well, like this. We need longer episodes to flesh out the story. General changes I would make concentrate specifically on Obi-Wan and Vader. Let's explore how Obi-Wan reconnects to the Force in a more meaningful way. We also need to learn a little bit more about Vader. Instead of focusing on Reva and no one else, have us learn about who Vader is, his strengths, his weaknesses. Obi-Wan beating Vader is very cool, but it still seems a bit jarring. Here's a guy who hasn't been training for many years and he's able to best arguably the strongest person in the galaxy. Here's what we needed after the Leia rescue mission. We needed a time skip, a sequence of Obi-Wan connecting to the Force again. Kenobi realizes that he's become weaker and he's unable to train Luke in his current state. So he sets off to rediscover the Force. Maybe he visits a Jedi temple like Cal Kestis did on Zepho. This keeps the focus of Kenobi intact. His mission is the same, to protect Luke. We scratch the double rescue mission idea of Princess Leia and instead we dial up the manhunt the Inquisitors have on Obi-Wan. Or, if you wanted the infiltration of Fortress Inquisitorius still in the show, let's frame it as a heist movie with planning and tension. Could you imagine how cool it would have been if they paired this episode with flashbacks of Kenobi being a general in the Clone Wars, and if they drew parallels to him leading a small squad to the fortress to rescue Leia? Let's see how Kenobi leans into being a general again, and maybe have more weight to him losing a soldier like Wade. We can still have Reva betray Vader, except we need Vader to kill Reva this time. In fact, you could just reorder the sequence and it could have been fine. Instead of this, show this. Have Reva interrupt Vader, giving her the upper hand and making it more of a believable surprise attack. In episode 6, I'd cut out a large chunk of the Star Destroyer pursuing the rebel ship, and instead almost immediately have Kenobi transition from his heroic speech to leading Vader away from the civilians. When Kenobi arrives on the rocky planet, we can get a scene of him meditating, wrestling with the fact that either Vader dies or he does. At this point, Qui-Gon's Force Ghost could appear and counsel Kenobi. Qui-Gon could reiterate to Obi-Wan that Anakin
is the chosen one. He will bring balance.
Obi-Wan now has a legitimate reason to keep Vader alive after their confrontation. Utilizing flashbacks, we can see how Obi-Wan knows the fighting tactics of Vader, and so it's not by power, but by patience and intellect that Kenobi is able to best Darth Vader in a duel. This show is that constant conflict with what it's trying to be. It isn't just an Obi-Wan show, it's a Leia show, a poor man's Inquisitor show, and the Reva show fused together. And this isn't the first time a Star Wars show has suffered from an identity crisis. Many people, myself included, were shocked at the direction the Book of Boba Fett took. I can get around and appreciate the tribal tale they wanted to tell with Boba and the Sand People. We could argue that it added more nuance to the Sandy Bandits of Tatooine, whom we've only known to be this. To be very one note, but the Book of Boba Fett tried so hard to reform the villain into a misunderstood hero to the point that it felt like a departure from the character. It was not just the show about Boba Fett, it was the Boba Fett meets Back to the Future Gang Gang in Mandalorian Season 2.5. Like most of us, when those Mandalorian episodes came through, I was a little kid giddy with excitement, but after some time elapsed, I began to think, this is a really terrible model to execute a show about a character. The Mandalorian show progressed far too much in the Book of Boba Fett show. It's kind of a no-brainer. Don't progress another show's plot at the expense of your own plot. Yet I think we felt this resonate and ring through with the Kenobi show too. The Inquisitors do nothing, except Reva, who is displayed as unbelievably competent, to the point that you may believe someone gave her a synopsis of the story. Reva literally drives the plot instead of Obi-Wan. The public was originally told that the show would be a 6-hour-long limited series. Instead, we get a show that, excluding credits but including recaps, clocks in just shy of 4 hours long. The Snyder cut of Justice League is longer than this TV show. Another great way to contrast the show's identity crisis is to look at some of the characters' screen time. Obi-Wan has 1 hour and 39 minutes on screen, Leia has 44 minutes, and Reva has 37 minutes on screen. If you combine Reva and Leia's screen time, they almost match Obi-Wan's. Meanwhile, Darth Vader has only 22 minutes of screen time. That is almost the same amount of time as Tala had. This in and of itself reveals how fragmented the focus of this show is. As I've already noted, people don't die in this show. Characters don't die in the Star Wars cash cow franchise anymore, and it's ironically ruining Star Wars. It's so painfully obvious that Reva only lived so that a Reva show could happen, when in reality, her death would have serviced the plot far more. In TV, like in life, death should serve a purpose or consequence and add weight to a narrative. Loss is a part of our human condition, and it helps the audience resonate with characters and their grief. Fake out deaths, like we see with Reva and the Grand Inquisitor, lower stakes. It's an inevitable problem that when you pretend to kill a character but are actually going to bring them back, it takes away the tension any time that character is in danger. Keep retconning meaningful deaths and people catch on pretty quick, and it obliterates the viewer's immersion.
What the hell am I looking at?
The tonal conflict of this show, of Vader cracking necks juxtaposed with Leia's characterization and cute Lola droid, are obviously intended to cast a wider net and attract a wider audience. A bigger audience makes them more money after all.
Merchandising.
Another theme I'm seeing shine through is from the Disney Star Wars sequels, in the powering up of characters over little to no time at all. Rey is the personification of this, and I feel like they employed similar techniques to bring Kenobi back to power in the finale. In the original trilogy, we see Luke training with Yoda. In the prequels, we see the passage of time unfold between each movie. In Disney's Star Wars, they didn't show us any time elapsing, and they really need to show how these characters develop and grow. Look, this is speculation territory here, but hear me out. This show has been criminally short, but yet it still seems to drag out. The show is 6 episodes long, which equates to 6 weeks of releases, which means if you want to watch it every week when it comes out, you have to pay for 2 months of Disney Plus. I reckon this strategy, contrived by Disney, is to maximize revenue, and it could be a great contributing factor as to why this show wasn't just 3 or 4 tight and packed episodes long. The exciting nature of a limited series is that the creators set out to tell a complete and cohesive once-off narrative. So why does Kenobi feel incomplete, and why is it sequel baiting? Alright, let's wrap up. People love to hate on this show. Remember, it's a lot harder to create than it is to watch and criticize. Commencing my Obi-Wan Kenobi viewing, I had a habit of relentlessly nitpicking the show. I realized that I was doing this, and I genuinely didn't want to sound like or resemble a fan that complains at every turn for the sake of complaining. I decided that I'll wait and see how this plays out and reserve my judgment. I wanted to observe how in 6 episodes, they would dig themselves out of some of the narrative corners they wrote themselves into. And unfortunately, they only kind of succeeded. This show needed to justify its existence. Many believe it doesn't. I personally believe it just does, but I believe it fell over, stumbled, ran into a fence, and slipped in the mud in the process of reaching that final line. On the prospect of a second season, I think the battle to prove its existence and worth would be even higher. With director heads like Favreau or Filoni, I think a second season could have a fighting chance to learn from the mistakes of its predecessor, but it doesn't feel necessary. I truly believe this show would have benefited much greater if it had stuck to its target audience through and through. These are thematically dark times in the canon, let's make them dark. For me, this show is going to be littered with, do you remember that awesome moment? How cool was that bit? Rather than things we typically say about The Mandalorian season 1, like, I love that show. How good was that show? As it stands, this show served up some moments of greatness in Star Wars, and I think it's going to thrive in the stylized video compilation space. Here are just a few videos already out there that I think are well worth your time. Seriously, this video took way too long to make. If you liked it, could you please consider hitting that like button and maybe even this one a share? Helps me out a lot. If you really liked the video, consider subscribing. Anyway, until next time, have a fantastic day.